Hi, that's me, GTC. And you're about to watch how I turn this, and this, and this, and this, and this into... This house belongs to my parents. It's made up of 3 apartments, 1, 2, and 3. In January of 2022, the 2 families who lived in apartments 2 and 3 moved out after having lived there for 8 years. As you're about to witness, these apartments were left in horrible conditions. This apartment in particular had what I can best describe as the ugliest Smurf blue walls I had ever seen. Nevertheless, I decided to strike up a deal with my dad. I told him that I would invest $10,000 of my own money which I had saved up from waitressing, and that I would remodel both apartments. After I was done remodeling both apartments, I would list them on either Airbnb or rent them out, and anything I made after paying my dad rent, which was the same rate he was charging the previous tenants, I would get to keep as profit. Now, was I perhaps a little delusional thinking I could take on a project like this when I had absolutely zero experience? 100%. Was my dad hesitant on letting me take on a project like this when I had absolutely zero experience? 100%. But I can be pretty convincing when I want to. And thus began this project. Alright, now I know I said I didn't have any experience remodeling, which is true, but I had seen enough remodeling shows to know that any good project begins with a game plan. So I needed to get organized. I took the measurements of every room to know what I was working with. Then I went on Pinterest to look for inspiration, which of course is my favorite part of any project. I kind of already had an idea of what I wanted in mind. I wanted simple, I wanted earthy tones, I wanted minimalist. Essentially, I wanted to create a space where if my project didn't work out, at least I could move in and be happy. As for the budget, this is where I made most of my rookie mistakes. Like I said earlier, I had set aside $10,000 to remodel 2 apartments. However, I never really sat down beforehand to allocate where that money would go. Something that would, spoiler, come back to haunt me. But more on that later, because now that we were all organized, it was finally time to start. First thing on the agenda, buy paint. I decided to go with a mint green color just because honestly it's my favorite. After that, I chose flooring. I decided to go with vinyl flooring even though the apartment already had hardwood floor because after doing some research, I found that vinyl flooring had a much easier upkeep than hardwood floor. When I started the painting process, I actually had a lot of people tell me not to paint the wood trimming just because it can be a bit of a hassle to paint over wood. And while they weren't wrong, I just felt like the painted white trim made such a beautiful contrast with the mint green walls. I did hire someone to help me install the floors and with some painting because A, it was a lot of work, and B, I had no idea how to install floors. This same person that helped me with the floors also taught me how to install trimming, how to use a nail gun, and how to properly apply caulk. And just to be very clear, I do mean C-A-U-L-K caulk, not C-O-C-K caulk. You dirty birds. Anyway, this is what it started to look like, and I was absolutely falling in love. Retrospectively, I think I really did need this early sense of pride in the process because at this point, Between working at the restaurant and doing the remodeling, I was putting in well over 80 hours of work each week, and I just knew that I had so much work ahead of me, including the 2 rooms that I was most excited and nervous to work on, starting off with
the kitchen.
Now, for those of you who have never remodeled a kitchen, or even for those of you who are thinking of remodeling your kitchen, especially if it's from scratch, which is basically what I had to do because, the bottom cabinets were old and moldy, and the countertop, as you can see, didn't even fit the bottom cabinets, then...
Let me tell you something. All right. Let me tell you something.
It can be very expensive, which is why I did most of my shopping at Menards. And no, this is not sponsored by Menards, but I did find that they had great stuff for better prices than most of their competitors. The one downside that I do briefly want to mention, and this is not Menards specific, but rather was the case in most hardware stores that I went to, was that I found sometimes their employees were a bit condescending, and I get it. I was a 24-year-old girl with a shopping list who knew what she needed most of the time, and so I'm assuming that perhaps in a predominantly male-dominated field, that must have been odd to see. And although their comments, far from deter me, fueled me, they were definitely a bit disappointing, and I hope that with time that improves. But anyway, moving forward, I started off by painting the walls a cookie cream color. And then I painted the cabinets sage green to create a contrast. There was a hole in the wall where the stove used to be, so I had to learn how to install drywall, which is actually easier than what I expected. Then the dude who was helping me out helped me install the bottom cabinets as well as a countertop, which I got from IKEA. He then made a hole in the countertop so that I could install a white sink that I had bought, which went perfectly with the aesthetic. Seeing how it was turning out got me super excited, and I actually had this idea of adding a ceramic white tile backsplash, which I think was such a great call. Once I had the structure of the kitchen done, I needed to get some new appliances because the old ones were in such bad condition. Thankfully, my dad offered to go halvesies with me because a stove and a refrigerator are very expensive. And voila, just like that, I had the kitchen completed. And it turned out so much better than what I could have ever imagined. And with the kitchen done, there was only one more room to work on.
The bathroom.
I knew going into the bathroom that it was going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with because I was told that there were major plumbing issues. Now, I think because of the confidence I had from having just completed the kitchen and knowing that it was the last room, I was like, all right, bet. Let's just get this done. So after a bit of back and forth deciding on what I should do with the bathroom, I ended up choosing a wallpaper instead of painting. But the thing with wallpaper is that in order to put it on, the walls had to be super clean. So I spent a few days sanding the walls, and as to why I did it in heels, I honestly couldn't tell you. But this is how it would end up most nights after I was done sanding. Since I'd never used wallpaper before, it was really cool learning how to put it on. However, I don't think I would ever use it again, especially in a bathroom context, just because of how moist it gets. Now, if you see this picture, you'll see that I chose what is called a board and batten design for the lower half, which I absolutely loved. And then for the shower, you can see how dirty it was. So first I had to clean it, and then I bought a special tub paint to coat over it. And here it is, all done. I think the transformation for the bathroom, just like with the kitchen, were my favorite in the entire apartment, just because it looked so different from what I started with. And as you'll see, I actually had a custom design curtain to match the wallpaper because I'm extra like that, and I loved that little detail. At
this point in the process, I decided that instead of renting out the apartment, I wanted to list it on Airbnb, which meant I needed to furnish it. I also had to go back and fix some little details that I had left for once I was done with the main structure.
I want to preface that I am a very big thrifter. However, because I was attempting to stick to a specific color palette, I did end up buying some new items. For example, the couch, I wanted it to be gray, and I ended up finding this one on Amazon that I really like. And as you'll see, it went really well with the color scheme of the living room. Unfortunately, I also ran into some problems when buying the furniture. For example, one of my tables was broken upon delivery. I got a carpet that I ended up hating in person, and this mattress box spring that you see here ended up being way too big for the bed frame. I also ended up purchasing a TV because at least all the Airbnbs that I've been to, they had one. And so I had to go on the hunt for specials. As for the living room, I had always envisioned that on one of the walls, I was gonna do a wall gallery. It's something that I had seen on Pinterest that I immediately fell in love with. And so I did spend a few days going through a bunch of artwork. And it did take me quite a while to select the right pieces because I wanted it to be something that I enjoyed, but also something that others could see and get something positive from. So I did a lot that had to do with growth and with balance and positive messages, and also art and literature, which I've always been a big fan of. So that was really a fun process, but I definitely overthought it more than I had to. And then there were just minor details like buying dishes for the kitchen, buying utensils and appliances for the kitchen. And actually when they came to install the stove oven, one of the pieces had broken off, so I had to solve that issue as well. I also ended up installing a security lock system because obviously since it was with the intention of being an Airbnb, I needed there to be access for the guests to be able to check in on their own. And now for the moment of truth. The living room before, the living room after. The dining room before, the dining room after. The kitchen before, and the kitchen after. Here is what the bathroom looked like before, and this is what the bathroom looked like after. The big bedroom before, and the big bedroom after. And last but not least, the small bedroom before. And the small bedroom after. I just want to say thank you to everyone who watched part 1 of my video. I am so excited to finally be able to share this with you guys. I feel like a lot of artists can agree that there's always kind of like 2 parts to a project. There's the first part when you're filled with all these nerves and excitement because you're essentially handed this blank canvas and you don't know how it's going to turn out.
And then there's the other part when you're finally done with it and you get to put it out into the world and you're filled with the same nerves and excitement because now you don't know how it's going to be perceived. That's kind of what I'm feeling. But yeah, I'm so excited to share this with you guys. And obviously I couldn't include everything in the process, like all the behind the scenes stuff, because it would have been an extremely long video. But I did try to incorporate as much of what I had documented into this so that you guys can kind of come along with me in the journey, or felt like you were with me in the journey. A couple of things I do want to say is that it did take me approximately like 4 months to complete this apartment. And the original $10,000 budget that I had set aside for both apartments, I ended up using all of that money on this apartment alone. And I don't like to talk about money in the sense of like, it feels like it, like, I do not want it to be taken like I'm bragging. I more so only talk about money because whenever I watch projects like these, like on TikTok or YouTube or on TV, and people are remodeling, I'm always curious as to where they're getting the funds. So that's why I share that with you guys. And like I said in the video, I was also working at a restaurant while I was remodeling these apartments. That's how I was able to continue funding even after I had surpassed my original budget. So yeah, a few final thoughts. So I now understand why so many like successful business people say to keep your emotions out of a project. I could never do that, or it's really hard for me to do that. It was really hard for me to do that with this apartment because by the end of it, I became very attached and I started treating it like a baby. Like I was like, oh, I loved this apartment. And it was really hard for me, even though I knew I still had the other apartment that I needed to work on. And even though I had become incredibly burnt out, I still got post-project depression, which I don't really talk about a lot in this particular video. I kind of dive into it a bit more in part 2. But yeah, I didn't, like I said, I didn't really talk about it a lot in this one, but it is something that I went through because I loved it. I love this project. And on that note, I don't really say this out loud as often as I probably should. But I did want to also add that I'm very proud of myself for having accomplished this project because it was something that not only did I not have experience in, but it was something that just seemed like such a crazy dream. So to have seen it through, I'm like, damn, that's pretty cool. But more than that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who during the project helped me. And I don't just mean like helped me in a way like physically, I mean so morally. Like I glazed over a little bit in the video, but there were a lot of obstacles that I had to overcome and a lot of setbacks. And I genuinely do not think that this project would have been completed had I not had such a great support system and people who were constantly reminding me to remember why it was that I started, and who encouraged me when they saw me like burnt out and tired and crying. So thank you. You guys know who you are, and I love you. I also just want to say to anyone, to any artist or anyone who's working on any project and they feel stuck and they feel like they want to quit, as someone who has been there and has made it to the other side, I just want to remind you that as cliche as it is, Rome was not built in a day, and that consistency leads to progress, which eventually leads to success. So please, for the sake of all the beautiful art that you're going to create and for all the people who are going to enjoy it, hang in there. And on that incredibly cheesy but truthful note, I am going to peace out, and I do want to invite all of you to watch part 2 of this video that comes out September 30th.